Imagine you're scrolling through the news and you see this headline: Assaults on ICE agents up more than 1,000%. Your brain probably just exploded a little, right? I mean, 1,000%? That's not just a spike. That's a full-blown crisis. That's the kind of number that makes you think, what the hell is going on in America? Well, buckle up, because this story is wilder than you think. And spoiler alert, the truth is way more complicated, and honestly, way more entertaining than that scary headline suggests. So here's what happened. Throughout 2025, the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, started claiming that their agents were getting assaulted at absolutely insane rates. We're talking about claims that went from, hey, things are getting rough out there, to our officers are literally under siege in just a matter of months. The White House even issued an executive order in September citing this more than 1,000% increase. The Attorney General used it to justify deploying additional federal agents to cities like Portland and Chicago. This wasn't just a talking point. It became the justification for major policy decisions, massive funding increases, and some pretty controversial enforcement tactics. But here's the thing that should make your BS detector start beeping. When journalists asked for the actual data behind these claims, the government basically said, "Trust us, bro. No numbers, no methodology, no receipts, just vibes and press releases." So what's really going on? Let's dig in. So, journalists from NPR and Colorado Public Radio decided to do something radical. They actually checked the facts. They went through federal court records, the actual legal system where assault charges get filed, and counted up every single case of assault on a federal officer over the past 5 years. And guess what they found? The number of assault charges against federal officers in 2025 did go up, but not by 1,000%, not even close. The actual increase? About 25% through mid-September compared to the same period in 2024. Now don't get me wrong, a 25% increase is still significant. That's real. But it's a far cry from the apocalyptic scenario the government was painting. It's the difference between things are getting more tense and civilization is collapsing. Here's where it gets even more interesting. When these journalists repeatedly asked the Department of Homeland Security for the data behind their claims, basic stuff like, where did you get these numbers and how did you calculate this? The response was basically crickets. DHS declined to provide any justification. No raw data, no methodology, nothing. What they did send was hilarious in a depressing way. 6 links to their own press releases that just repeated the same 1,000% claim without explanation. Later, they sent details of 12 individual assault cases. 12. To justify a claim of a 1,000% increase across the entire country. Let's do some quick math here. For a 1,000% increase to be real, if there were, say, 100 assaults last year, there would need to be 100 this year. That's 1,000 additional assaults. But if only 12 cases are being highlighted and court records show just a 25% bump, where are all these other assaults? Are they happening in some secret dimension? The only way the government's numbers make sense is if there are literally thousands of assaults that never resulted in criminal charges. But that directly contradicts their own promise that every person who assaults an ICE agent will face the full extent of the law. Something doesn't add up, and that's putting it mildly. Now here's where this story goes from sketchy to absolutely bonkers. The government didn't just make one claim and stick with it. Oh no, they kept raising the stakes like they were in a poker game with imaginary chips. Let's look at the timeline. In June 2025, a Homeland Security official claimed assaults on ICE agents had increased by 413%. Okay, that's already a huge number. But apparently it wasn't dramatic enough, because just 1 week later, the claim jumped to 500%. Then by July 8th, it was suddenly 700%. A week after that, 830%. And by early August, the head of ICE went on television and claimed it was more than 1,000%. At this point, you have to wonder if there was a whiteboard somewhere at DHS headquarters where someone was just adding 100 every few days. The wildest part? They never explained what they were comparing these numbers to. Was it compared to last year, last month, the 1990s? Nobody knew because they wouldn't say. Now, before you think I'm being too harsh, let's remember something important. President Trump literally wrote about this strategy in his 1987 book, The Art of the Deal. He called it truthful hyperbole, a fancy way of saying exaggerating to make a point. He's been open about using this tactic for decades. But here's the problem. When you're a real estate developer hyping up a building project, that's one thing. When you're law enforcement making claims that justify deploying federal agents into American cities, concealing their identities with masks, and requesting billions in additional funding, that's a completely different ballgame. As former FBI agent Bob Pence put it, when law enforcement engages in hype or misleading statements, it jeopardizes trust in the entire criminal justice system. And once that trust is gone, it's incredibly hard to get back. Okay, let's be absolutely clear about something. There have been real, serious assaults on ICE agents. This isn't all smoke and mirrors. Some of these incidents were genuinely dangerous and could have turned deadly. In July, 15 people were charged in what authorities called a plot to lure ICE agents out of a Texas detention center and then open fire on them. A civilian police officer was wounded. Last month, a sniper opened fire on an ICE detention center in Texas, killing 2 detainees, though federal officials believe the agents were the actual target. In Omaha, an ICE agent was slammed to the ground during an arrest and had to be hospitalized. Another agent in California said he was dragged by a car. These are serious incidents, and they deserve to be taken seriously. But then, there are the other cases. The ones that make you go, wait, what? Let's talk about the ham sandwich incident. I'm not making this up. In Washington, D.C., a man threw a ham sandwich at a Customs and Border Protection agent. He was charged with assaulting a federal officer, a felony. But when prosecutors tried to get a grand jury to indict him a couple weeks later, the grand jury said, nah, we're good. They refused to indict. Even citizens serving on a grand jury were like, this is ridiculous. Then there's the case in Denver. A Venezuelan man named Abraham Gonzalez Romero knocked an ICE agent to the ground while running away from a jail. It was caught on video, a minor skirmish with no injuries. But a Republican congressman went on national television and claimed the guy bit an ICE agent and was a member of the Tren de Aragua gang. In court, federal prosecutors made zero effort to prove either claim. His attorney said the bite never happened and there was no evidence of gang membership. And here's the kicker. Despite the government's promise to prosecute all assaults to the fullest extent of the law, they dropped the assault charge in a plea deal. In Los Angeles, where there were major protests around ICE operations, federal prosecutors tried to get felony indictments against 38 people. They only succeeded 7 times. The rest dismissed, reduced to misdemeanors, or resolved with plea deals. So yes, real assaults are happening. But the gap between the government's rhetoric and what's actually holding up in court is absolutely massive. You might be thinking, okay, so the government exaggerated some numbers. Politicians lie, what else is new? But this isn't just about inflated statistics. It's about what those statistics are being used to justify. These claims of a 1,000% increase in assaults have been cited to authorize some pretty significant things. The Attorney General used them to deploy additional federal agents to Portland and Chicago, specifically to defend ICE facilities. The White House used them in an executive order to justify expanded enforcement powers. And perhaps most importantly, they've been used to justify a massive budget increase. $45 billion over the next 3 years for immigrant detention and deportation operations. Let me repeat that. $45 billion. With a B. That's not pocket change. That's the kind of money that could fund a lot of things. Schools, infrastructure, healthcare. But it's being funneled into enforcement operations based on statistics that, when examined, don't hold up. These inflated numbers have also been used to justify ICE agents wearing masks and street clothes to conceal their identities during operations, conducting what critics call rapid smash-and-grab arrests. When people questioned these tactics, the response was essentially, our agents are under attack. Look at these assault numbers. But beyond policy and funding, there's something even more fundamental at stake: trust. Bob Pence, that former FBI agent with 30 years of experience, put it perfectly. When law enforcement makes misleading statements, the public stops believing them. And when the public stops believing law enforcement, they stop cooperating. They stop reporting information. They stop participating in the justice system. Once that trust is broken, it affects everything. It affects jury verdicts, witness cooperation, and public support for legitimate law enforcement operations. You can't run a justice system when nobody believes what you're saying, and that's exactly what's at risk here. So what's the bottom line here? America doesn't actually have an extreme high number of ICE assaults, at least not in the way the government wants you to believe. What America has is an extreme gap between what officials claim and what the data actually shows. The real story isn't about a 1,000% spike in violence against federal agents. It's about how statistics can be weaponized to justify policies, secure funding, and shape public opinion. It's about how truthful hyperbole might work in business negotiations, but becomes dangerous when applied to law enforcement and civil liberties. Here's what you should take away from this. Always ask for the receipts. When you see a shocking statistic, especially one that's being used to justify major policy changes or billions in spending, dig deeper. Who's making the claim? What's their methodology? Can independent sources verify it? Because in this case, when journalists actually looked at the court records, the government's dramatic claims fell apart faster than a ham sandwich assault charge. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, if someone won't show you the data, there's probably a reason why. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.